All right, we're going to talk politics on breakfast now. Ed Husic joins us, Federal Labor member for Chifley, and Josh Frydenberg, Federal Liberal member for Kooyong. Morning to you both.
G'day.
Good to have you here. I'm going to start with you, Josh, because in the Australian on Friday, you wrote a very interesting article about Carr, the new Minister of Finance, not Finance, the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, and how you think that his views fundamentally are at odds with Julia Gillard's.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Bob Carr never expected to be Foreign Minister, there's no doubt about that. So a couple of years ago he started writing a blog, and he really opened up as to his real thoughts on that blog. For example, on Iran, he talked about them getting a couple of crude devices being better than conflict with Iran. On Afghanistan, he said that had resolved nothing, our involvement in Afghanistan, whereas the Prime Minister is right to say we're making a real difference on the ground.
To be fair, he is taking those things off his blog now.
Yeah, but there is real views. But Paul, you know, the point is here, as Foreign Minister, he needs to own Australian foreign policy. He needs to implement it consistent with his own convictions. And if his views about the rise of China and America's relationship with China, if his views about the Dalai Lama
fundamentally different,
then I think this is going to create some inconsistency.
Josh has got a point, Ed, hasn't he?
Well, yes and no. I mean, firstly, I just want to say I think Channel 10 can actually market, instead of Angry Birds, us two as Angry Buds. I think that's going to
like it.
Throw you at each other.
Okay? Yeah.
We'll do it on the couch rather than on the interweb.
I just don't want to see the iPad app. Look, people are entitled to have their private views. I mean, all of us have views that where we work with people or we work in organisations, we have our views. But ultimately, it's what you're doing in terms of trying to advance the interests of the organisation. In this case, it's advance the interest of the country. Now, Bob has said, look, those were private views, and that he would take the time once he's sworn in
to change his mind,
obviously get across issues and to determine where policy's headed. And you know what's great about him is he's big enough to say, look, where I've had a difference and I've seen what's being done, I've been wrong and I'm willing to change my mind. I think that's what you want in politicians.
Just a quick point. He's on his first mission as Foreign Minister, but he hasn't been sworn in yet. Does that have ramifications for his expenses?
I couldn't say. I'll have to talk to someone. And
I mean, when he comes back to Julia with the chits, I mean, he isn't actually the Foreign Minister yet.
Yes.
Receipts.
It's an
Julia, I've got the chits.
It's an internationalist program.
But Paul, there is a law that actually says, it hasn't been used, I think, only once the last century, which says that you can be a minister without actually having been sworn in.
So actually, when I go back to New Zealand, am I effectively on a ministerial trip? Because I haven't been sworn in either.
You might think
I reckon
you
we'll
are.
be clamping that right now. There are people right now
very reason.
You'll have to go economy, by the way.
Is that how he travelled?
No,
I can't even
He doesn't
imagine
do that. He never turns right.
One just very quick one from me, Stephen Smith.
Yeah.
You know, there was talk of him even potential leadership prospect, and yet now he is the embattled Stephen Smith. Where do you stand on his current career position?
Look, he's badly burnt by this episode, and he clearly overreacted in an initial response, and he seems to have lost the confidence of the people in uniform, the men and women in uniform. This is pretty serious.
Do you think he overreacted?
I think he did, because he didn't have the full facts, and he passed a judgment on Commandant Kafer straight away.
I think a lot of people would have agreed with him in that situation where there was an alleged assault, to then bring up other cases. I tend to agree with him. I understand where he potentially has caused a rift between the Defence Force and himself, but I don't know, I would agree with what he said in the first place and that he's sticking by it.
Look, the point is now he must apologise, because he's created great hurt and he's been forced now...
He's not going to.
He's not, well, and I think this is creating a bit of an untenable situation. So people, a number of senior commentators in the media have called for his resignation. The Australian Defence Association has been extremely, I think, unprecedented in their criticism of him. His position is very fragile.
It's a blow to his career path, isn't it?
Look, I've known Stephen for best part of 10 years. The guy, the way he approaches things is he thinks through where he's headed. He doesn't let emotion govern his decision-making processes. I'm going to make a call, and that is, if he's reacted in the way that he has, he sees or has information that has led him to that point. And the other thing is too, when Channel 10 broke this story, the bigger deal was she had gone through all this pain and then been subjected to another disciplinary matter, which people thought was on the periphery. So, I'm going to back Stephen on this. I reckon he's got reason to act the way he does. The bloke doesn't normally act that way, And look, I take on board people's scores. There have been all sorts of people making all sorts of claims. I think there's a little bit more to go on this.
Do you think it doesn't seem like it's going to go away, though? Until there's
and it's not going to go
apology.
away.
Well, we're not going to let it go away, are we? We're going to keep feasting on this for ages.
Can I say, it's not a good look when you've got your foreign minister who's at odds with your prime minister, you've got your defence minister who's under siege, and you've got a prime minister who goes overseas and said, personally, I'm not really interested in foreign affairs. So I think at a time when we've got forces out in the field in Afghanistan, right, and we've got some serious issues in our own neighbourhood, in Papua New Guinea and Fiji, etc., and we've got tensions in the Middle East, bringing in the United States, possibly a nuclear Iran. You know, this is an important time for Australia.
Right. It is Canberra Day today, guys. And, I mean, I've talked to you, Ed, about my views on Canberra, it just being basically weird.
These are the private views.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Paul's private views are public.
But the thing is, I mean, it'd be very interesting to get your views, because neither of you chose to live in Canberra, but you spend a lot of your time there.
Sure.
What do you make of the place?
Oh, in terms of Canberra itself, it does take some time to adjust, but from our perspective, like, we're stuck in Parliament House for the bulk of the week, along with about 3,000 other people.
Yeah.
So you don't really get to see much outside at any rate.
3,000 exciting people as well.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's much outside to see. I don't think, Ed, there's a lot going on you're missing out on.
I think is the term the youth use.
Do you enjoy it, Josh? Do you like getting down there, or is it better being home?
Look, I mean, I love being home, obviously, and I'm from Melbourne, which is a great city, but Canberra's very livable. There's lots of open spaces. The weather's pretty crisp. There's not as much rain as you get. Crisp.
Very cold.
It's cold. It's cold.
Spaces, because a lot of people don't
I mean, this is
there.
the problem you get with capital cities. If you look right around the world, I mean, look at Washington. In South Africa, you've got Pretoria. In Canada, you've got Ottawa. I mean, they're compromises when you create capital cities. You know, in Australia's case, it was between Sydney and Melbourne, they couldn't agree.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, you know, you don't get the best, most exciting city, and that's not good for the diplomats who all live there, but it's not
bad. We go for the cold cities to calm the hotheads down.
Nice. You sort of haven't sold it to us. Ed, Josh, thank you so much. Happy Canberra Day to everyone else.
Oh, yeah, happy Canberra Day.
It's 99th birthday today.
It is a funny old thing, though, isn't it? You know, we won't choose Sydney because a lot of people have chosen to live there. We won't choose Melbourne because a lot of people have chosen... Oh, I know, no one lives there. Let's choose that
It sounds a bit like a compromise, I think.
Then that's where we send all the pollies. Is that such a bad thing?
Yeah, true.
We're going to get to a break. When we come back, we're going to go to all the capital cities. Not necessarily Canberra, but all the other capital cities. Tell you what's going on around the nation.
Or Kooyong, I would think.
It's your